Now, this one comes from the Innovation Sustainable Development Committee, so I'll hand over to Vicky.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to move all of those recommendations except 1A. And I'm not moving 1A because I would prefer that the target date was 2040 rather than 2045. But I also want to thank the Innovation and Sustainability Committee, who I think, and particularly the staff, who did an enormous job on collating and organising all of the submissions from people on such an important subject, and then working through what we were going to recommend. It didn't operate as a hearings committee, so it is acceptable to move an amendment. So I'm kind of hoping somebody's going to move an amendment to A of 2040. But all of the targets have that were put forward have a halfway point, a 50% reduction by 2030. So whichever one we go with, we need to be halfway there by 2030. So across the city, this is a reasonably ambitious target, except of course that Christchurch's emissions are only about 6.6 tonnes per person, and a big chunk of that, somewhere between 40 and 53%, on depending on how you measure, what aspect of transport you measure, is transport. So we have an opportunity to make an incredible difference in transport. We have increased by all five of us the reduction in methane emissions, and I think the thing that we got, apart from the inspiration actually of meeting all the people who made submissions, who were really stunning, was the importance, a recognition of the importance of us all taking action. That it's not actually any use if a few people are incredibly good and get their emissions down to zero, that we all need to do something, and we all need to do something incredibly quickly. You'll see some recommendations in here that suggest some further action. We've already passed the climate emergency, which gave strategic priorities of climate change mitigation and safe, sustainable water, the top priorities. So that's already in place, and there's already been a lot of action by the council on climate change. This seeks some more. So in terms of the target of net zero, we want that to be highly visible to everybody so that everybody sees it, whether they're 5 and start asking questions, or whether they're 80 and concerned about their grandkids, which were some of the submitters. We've also asked that we seek a target for all council-owned companies to be net carbon neutral by 2030. That will obviously be through the statement of intent. Obviously using the procurement policy, since we spend $1 billion a year, to ensure that those businesses and organisations we trade with are also focusing on being net carbon neutral. We've asked for some exploring the possibility of changing the district plan to require more sustainable and energy efficient buildings. We know that's a tricky one, and we know that that's not always supported at a governmental level, but we think it's really important given the percent that comes from stationary energy. The thing that came up over and over again from practically every submitter was the importance of public transport. From kids and from adults and from organisations, it just kept coming up and up. Clearly people wanted council to control it. They were very clear on that, and they wanted action in terms of much better public transport and much fewer emissions from public transport. So I'm very happy to move these, except with that little exception of 1A. The reason I'm not happy to move that is I think personally climate change is the most important issue that we face. I wouldn't feel comfortable with going with something that I think is too far out. Personally, I think you have to be true to yourself in whatever you do. So from my point of view, 2040 is the very latest. I would personally like that to be brought forward beyond that, but 2040 is fine. There are a number of cities, Copenhagen, for example, which is targeting 2025. So this is not outrageous or unachievable. We have to get to halfway by 2030, and I don't know then why on earth given the impact of climate change everywhere, every time you turn on the news, why on earth we would take the foot off the pedal for the second half. So I'm very happy to move 1B right through to 2O.
It's an unusual situation because the decision of the Innovation and Sustainability Development Committee was to recommend the lot.
Yep.
So I will take the A1 from. Normally I would just take somebody to move the lot, and then somebody can move an amendment. Sarah, you want to move. It seems an odd way to do this, that it's all by itself. But I want to have the resolution on the table so that if somebody wants to move an amendment, it is actually going against the majority decision of the Innovation and Sustainable Development Committee. So I think it's important that the resolution is on the table, that people can amend. So in many respects, it would be better to have someone move the lot and then somebody can move the amendment.
I'm
flagging that I'll move an amendment.
I've already moved all of those, except that we've discussed this before. It's not a hearings panel, so I'm quite capable of doing that. So somebody just needs to move A, and then I think 1A.
Sarah,
I'm happy to move an amendment when it comes.
You will move A, and do you have a seconder for that, Mike?
I would like to move an amendment, please, Leanne.
Just a minute, I haven't got the resolution on the table yet.
Okay, get it on the table.
Do I have a seconder for the motion, the balance of the recommendations? Sarah? Which is B.
All of the rest.
All of the rest. So
they were unanimous, right, across.
So Vicky has moved from 1B onwards, and Sarah has seconded that resolution. And in addition, Sarah and Mike have moved and seconded
1A.
the 1A.
Yep.
And I'm hearing that Phil Clearwater is desperate to move an amendment to 1A.
The whole issue is extremely urgent, so I would like to amend 1A to B
You can't move it to 2B.
Instead of gas emissions by 2045 to 2040, please. I understand what you mean, but 2040, please. 2040,
and do I have a seconder for that, Pauline? Right. So we have an amendment to 1A, which is 2040. So I'm going to assume that generically there's support for everything else, and the real focus of the debate will be on whether it's.
I think people should be allowed to debate the lot.
Yes, of course they will be allowed to debate the lot. For goodness sake, I'm just trying to be helpful here. But I don't want to have two separate debates, is what I'm suggesting.
That's fine.
Yeah, that people can debate within that context. Okay, so does anyone have any questions for staff? I've got a couple of questions in relation to the submissions because I wasn't there. But Yanni.
Thank you. This will be a familiar question, but I just think it's important to understand. We had a climate smart strategy in 2010, and a lot of the targets weren't achieved. Can you just kind of give an explanation as to why we didn't achieve more with the existing strategy that we had, and what's different about this strategy that we're being asked to adopt today?
I should say we're not being asked to adopt a strategy today. We're looking at targets at the moment. Tony put the strategy.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. So my view is that the strategy we set in 2008 was implemented in part, and the targets that were set largely reflected the targets that had already been set by the council for the various activities such as waste and transport and energy as well. So they were actually reflecting what the council had already committed. What we're doing here today is setting new targets with the knowledge of new information around the science and the urgency, which has already been reflected in the discussion so far. So we're actually reinforcing what we've previously set and trying to step up, if you will, as a council to set more ambitious targets because we now have new information.
I think I also think that the success of these types of strategies really require the community buy-in. And while under, the previous strategy was at a time where there was a different context around. And so it's really critical now that in setting the targets and the work that we do in sort of developing the ongoing strategy and action plans, we really do that hand in hand with the community. And I think without that buy-in, and that's probably to an extent a reason why we didn't achieve all of the last strategy.
We could add to that internally as well, in terms of the last strategy was done more standalone, although it did integrate the targets from each particular area. The next strategy will be at a higher level that does the implementation through things like our strategic transport plan and other areas that are focused on areas that we actually deliver in. So we have learned from the last strategy in terms of what worked and what didn't, and we're taking on the increased focus from our community as well.
So is there a risk then if the community doesn't see this as achievable, is there a risk if you set the target or set the bar too high that you won't take people with you? Is that
I absolutely think that is a risk, and we know from the survey that we did where we had nearly 3,000 respondents. It was one of the most responded to surveys that we have done, and in that the majority said that they wanted targets that were realistic and achievable. And I do think that we've got a number of initiatives that we've already got underway, and we've taken action on climate change, but we really, to make the type of transformational change we need to achieve these targets, we have to have community buy-in.
Yeah. And I've got Anne and then Phil.
With the 3-year review component of this, if we felt like that we were getting the buy-in, that we were really getting traction on this, could we then amend that to?
Absolutely, we can always bring the targets forward. Absolutely, I mean that would be a great position that we could be in if we were making really good progress. That we could then bring them forward.
Right, that's very reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you for the report. So you're really saying that the staff view is that bringing it closer to, say, 2040 isn't realistic or achievable. But what I'm really puzzled about is clearly Norway have got a target like that, and Councillor Buck referred to Copenhagen. So I'm just a bit puzzled as how come it's they see it as achievable and realistic, and yet as staff you're saying it's not here.
We haven't said it's not achievable or realistic. We were asked to set the targets. After the declaration of emergency, we were asked to set the targets. And the actual pathways to achieving those targets, there are different options that are not... The cost to people of the change that's required is not fully understood. So it's not that it can't be achieved, it's that we haven't set out those options for achieving it yet. We know what's going to happen if we don't act, and that's why the base option is by 2050 aligned with central government. We're not even suggesting an option of do nothing, but in terms of the cost and the capability to actually achieve it, which sits on everyone, it doesn't just sit on our council. We're one part and our whole district has to buy into this. So our staff recommendation of 2045 was taking the most optimistic end of the IPCC targets to combine the desire for really strong action, whilst, as Emma has just been talking about, taking that community view as well of trying to make sure it's realistic. So
thank you. But if the costs aren't clear now, I'm unclear as to why it would take an extra 5 years after 20 years to actually work that out and get there.
No.
I think one of
you review it every 3 years.
One of the biggest challenges with setting a target that's 10 years ahead of where the government might set it is that the tools and levers that the government will enact to try and reach their targets, we won't have access to. We'll be well ahead of them needing to reach that target. So I think the main issue for us is to try and be close enough to the government's target, but also be leading, to demonstrate leadership within that. If we're too out of step, then the rules around housing, emissions trading, levers, those things will be placed to meet the government's target, not ours, and we'll be out of step with those.
And I mean, we've certainly looked what other countries are doing, and some are being more ambitious. We recognise that, but we also need to look at our situation, our emissions profile, and be realistic about what we actually need to achieve. So I think it's really helpful to look at other nations. We can learn from them, but we've taken into consideration, that global research. The views of the community and some of those particular issues that Christchurch face and what we've recommended as a target.
Jimmy and Anne.
The committee also have a kind of the recommendation, particular the part 2, the I, seeking a target for all council-owned companies to be net carbon neutral by 2030 for their activities. My question is because we particularly emphasize this target will be reviewed every 3 years. Okay.
Yes.
So whether after 3 years we like to undertake these reviews overall, including council-owned company, and also outside of the whole city, or just review all outside of the whole city regarding to this target.
Yes, so this target is for the city, and so that would include CCOs include CCOs. Currently, the council target of 2030, that is just for council operations, so that excludes the CCOs. Does that answer the question?
Anne?
Thank you. We talked a lot about in the committee meeting about how we get that buy-in and using comms. Have you had a chance to kind of think about some of the things you could do? The challenges to make this real for people, and so it's everyday life stuff that we want. People find this difficult to understand, and how we communicate what we're doing in a way that is, well, I guess it makes it achievable for people. They can see, aha, I can do this. How are you going with that work?
Yes, so we're working with our communications teams around that, and we've talked about that. There's a program of work around that. So we're very aware that people need to be educated, and we've talked about that there is quite a lot of information to understand. So in our communications, it will be very sort of education-based. So we'll do that, and then it's really working alongside the schools, other community groups to get that messaging out. And we realise we need to tell stories and make it meaningful and relevant. And we've talked about, a lot of emphasis about providing lots of information so people know what they can do and what actions they can take. And I think that's what we heard. So there's a lot to do there. We've got lots of good ideas. We need to develop those and get on with that.
I mean, just one example, the Ministry of Education has contracted a local lady to develop a program around climate change for schools, and we've been asked to be the role model to test that out in Christchurch. So our students in Christchurch were one of the first to experience this climate change specific education program.
Glenn?
Thank you. Last year in November, the World Council of Churches put out a comment to this effect that the latest research by the IPCC reveals that global warming is likely to cross the 1.5 degree threshold already between 2030 and 2052 if it continues to increase at the current rate. Any comment on that? Or?
That's correct. So you're absolutely right. It's really urgent. The issue is really urgent that all communities in the world get behind this. The trajectory we're currently taking is not one of avoiding emissions, and we all need to be doing what we can in our own communities, and then we rely on the governments of the world to make those changes as well.
It's like compounding debt, effectively, in terms of the rate of deterioration.
It's very significant, and that's echoing the councillors' concerns as well as the community's concerns, how important it is we respond to this.
Okay, thanks.
There are other questions? All good? Did you have a question?
Well, yeah, because just around the urgency and the setting a date of 2045 and declaring a climate emergency, but saying it's 26 years away is... you're shaking your head?
You finish your question. We're not saying the urgency is 26 years away. The science tells us we should already be carbon zero. We've already crossed over the point of no return.
My point.
In an ideal world, we would be literally stopping everything now. This climate change team fully understands the science. We know the urgency.
Yep.
The challenge we have is the world that we live in, and our ability and your ability as a bunch of, you're the councillors, you're not the whole of Christchurch, and we have a whole lot of people that don't understand the science or don't want to, because the reality of that means such a massive change to them. This is not small and it's not going away, but 2045 is what we believe is the most achievable one to start with. And as Anne has talked about, education is a massive component of our climate change programme, both internally and externally. Us alongside all the amazing people in Christchurch that are delivering nationally leading edge work. So yeah, of course we would like to.
Because I watched a documentary last week twice, and because it takes a bit to sink in, is that there was a tipping point that if you're not carbon neutral by, and I think the date he used was 2040, it might have been slightly earlier, if we're not neutral by then you get into an irreversible danger zone, which Vicky refers to. So why would the uninformed public, who are the non-believers, look to the believers kind of going, well, why are you steering us so far off something that's irreversible? Why wouldn't you give us the date we have to be there by?
People are also looking, though, for understanding how they can get there. So it's part of that journey and setting sort of a realistic target. The feedback was very strong that they do want to understand how we're going to achieve that as well. So it's balancing that sort of aspiration with, and this is why we've made the recommendation of 2045, with actually time to sort of, work through the steps of how we can show how we're going to get there. With sort of tangible steps, so it's a balance.
The irony is this documentary is called 2040. You probably know of it, and we could do free public showings, and then we wouldn't need too much convincing.
We actually have we've asked the 2040 people. At the moment it's still only in the cinemas, but we would be able to hire out a cinema if we wanted to, but after that we would be wanting to do showings inside the council, so we've already made those connections, and Tony as well.
Because that's the first of the docos, and it won't be the last, but has a lot more positive solutions than the doom and gloom, and I think that's the next step. Because you've got all the believers, they're there. It's the non-believers you need on the journey, which I think ones like this are good for.
Yeah, I just wonder whether that's accurate, whether it's a strict dichotomy between believers and non-believers, or are there actually a whole lot of people out there feeling helpless and powerless to do anything in the wake of the scale of the challenge that we face? And I'm just wondering whether that's the real reason that it's better to take the approach of working better than, but not too distant from the government's target at this stage. The government's target will come back, but this target will come back as well. But and I personally think that we'll always stay ahead of the game. But and we have taken a leadership position in terms of our own organisation, 2030. I wouldn't sign up to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy until I knew that we could actually measure and deliver on the changes. So, I'm trying to understand the challenge of the risk of actually just thinking it's believers and non-believers, and all they require is for us to pass a resolution.
I don't think it is that simple. No,
and
we've heard those people. We've heard deputations through the submissions, and we've heard deputations. People that have come and spoken to council, and I think people are on. They're sort of at different stages in terms of their understanding at this, and actually understanding what they need to do. So people are all at different stages on that sort of continuum.
The survey that we asked residents they gave us feedback that 77% of those people felt that climate change was a significant issue and that they were going to be affected by it.
Yep.
So there's a lot of people out there, for those that we surveyed anyway, who were concerned about climate change and wanting to see action.
Yeah. And just the other thing is that maybe just a bit of a teasing out on the principle of climate justice, you know, because often the impacts are being sheeted home to the people who are least able to, you know, afford the cost, but also even are going to experience some of the effects thereof. I mean, here we do have, well, there are always challenges in terms of giving communities an opportunity to come on board and learn adaptive management skills in a coastal environment, rather than have somebody some distance away telling them that this will happen when, and a computer model determining what their future will be.
This is absolutely a justice issue, and it's a justice within the generation, as you've just indicated, but also between generations.
Yeah.
Because what are we forcing on others in the future?
Okay.
Just remind us, for everyone here, what the government faces in terms of per person carbon emissions.
Okay, so the footprint of a New Zealander is 18 tonnes per person per year. And
So-
in Christchurch, because of the way you do the accounting, we've drawn lines around Christchurch District, and it works out that it's only 6.6 tonnes.
6.6. So the government's target of 2050 for 18 to reduce to net carbon neutral, and with 2 baskets and methane separately, is based on 18,
That is correct.
as opposed to us being 6.6, which is, of the major cities, the third lowest?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Anne?
Oh, I was just going to ask, you know, that's science is understood by some. Would people out there generally understand what that was all about in terms of tonnage and all sorts of things? Do you think that's the challenge that we face?
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, the amount, you know, a tonne of carbon, what is it? It's, you know,
Yes, exactly.
who would know? Yeah, sure. It's a conversation, but it's more about what people can do about it, I think. It's enabling people, giving them agency, making sure that the environment around them supports taking the right decisions so that they can be encouraged to do the right thing.
Sometimes information can be disempowering.
Sure.
And so we need to find ways, and I feel really confident that you're doing this, to ways to empower people so that they feel that they do have control. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some good little tools that are kind of like calculators, so as you take action you can see the impact of that. So, you know, simple things like that people can use and kind of engage with are important.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll open it up for debate. So it's across the board. Andrew, Yanni, Phils.
Thank you. We've heard in this chamber a number of times that this is urgent, and the financial cost of being ambitious today could well turn out to be very small in terms of the social and financial cost of deciding to do something but more slowly today, or even worse, deciding to do nothing. There's an element of leading by example that the council needs to take here, and there are certainly elements of education and generating understanding about the seriousness and urgency of these issues. It's said that we need to look to international examples, and I wanted to provide one international example this afternoon, which is the Indonesian capital city of Jakarta, city of 10 million people, but more to the point, a city of 3.5 million commuters, and all of the pollution and traffic problems that generates. But more to the point, Jakarta is a city which is sinking by an average of 6 centimetres a year in the context of 6 millimetres of sea rise a year in that same local environment. So Jakarta is a city where currently the capital of Indonesia, where the Indonesian government just a few weeks ago made a decision to move the capital of Indonesia from Jakarta to Borneo. This is retreat on a grand scale. And it's the sort of thing that a few years ago people would never have thought of, and this demonstrates why this is urgent. So there's certainly a lesson there for our low-lying coastal communities in New Zealand, but I think there's a bigger lesson for our commuting communities in New Zealand and our wider community in New Zealand, and Christchurch has got a leading role to play here. So we need to do things differently. There's a big emphasis on transport whenever we talk about these climate change and carbon-related issues, and transport certainly is one area where we've got a lot of influence. So we need to get on with this. We need to get on with this as quickly as possible. Yes, there are challenges. We need to confront them head on. All of those things are the reasons why I'll be supporting this today, but why I'll also be supporting the amendment.
Yanni.
Thank you. I will definitely be supporting the amendment. But I think what we need to keep in mind is that this council in 1995 adopted, I think, its first climate change policy. It adopted another one in 2010. We weren't allowed to call it climate change at the time. I remember fondly because I was on that hearing panel. We were told that we would call it climate smart because we didn't want to upset the government of the day. The reality is that there are so many things that we should have been doing, that we could do, that don't cost a lot of money but create a way to change behaviour. Monitoring, reporting, setting up genuine progress indicators. What I have found incredibly disheartening is despite the fact that we've adopted strategy after strategy, some of the things still don't get done for very low cost but for huge environmental impact. The struggle to get groups like Enviro Schools fully funded and have schools on waiting lists to learn about environmental education because we reduced their funding, and yet it was one of our key things in our last strategy. We have to start walking the talk. We have to start doing. Just having a strategy isn't going to achieve anything unless we are committed to action. I love the idea of setting aspirational targets rather than things that we can simply tick off and say that we've achieved. I do think there is an urgency around climate change. I think it is very real, but the reality is that the more that we do now, the less, hopefully, we have to do in the future. And as someone who's got a 4-year-old daughter, if we can't make significant change in the next 2 decades, I really worry about the future of the planet and the environment that she will grow up in and inherit. I think we heard today from an amazing group of young people, of children from the local school, around the importance of our waterways and our environment. And I think we deserve to give those people hope that we will take this issue seriously and that we will make change and we will do things different than what we've currently been done. Most of the stuff in this that's being talked about are things that we've actually already agreed to do as a council. We're just not doing them. So I think today is the time to say we're committed to action, we're committed to aspirational goals rather than just things that we can tick off and say are achievable. Let's get on and get this done, being mindful of the impacts that it could have on people, being collaborative, being engaged, and fully recognising that this will be difficult, but that this is absolutely necessary.
Phil?
Thank you, Leanne. I think that Councillor Jimmy Chen will agree with me that I understand that the Chinese word for crisis is also the same word for opportunity.
No, it isn't.
Oh.
It actually isn't, so don't be smart.
Well, maybe I've got the Chinese word wrong, but
Two separate words.
Okay.
Wei-ji, ji-wei.
Yeah. However, the point is that in fact we can turn this round to be an opportunity for our city where anything is possible. There's no doubt that in fact we will need and can have buy-in from the whole community, and that's where council can lead by way of what we do. But I fail to see really that what could we not specifically do in 20 years that's meant to take 25 years. I also fail to see why we shouldn't have carbon limits the same way we see nitrates in water. Are we really going to wait to 2045 before we start to sort nitrate stuff? I don't think so. We actually have a city where we've had a history of strong achievement. We have sorted a lot of our air pollution issues over the years. They are now, that's an example of what we can achieve when we had what were then aspirational, and it started off like an inspiration from people saying we need to clean it up, and it's become achievable. This great opportunity for Christchurch with in terms of achieving it by way of the fact that 53% of our carbon emissions are through transport. If we really put our mind to it, we could really drive our transport electrically, the whole system, and that would be a long way towards actually achieving this by 2040 instead. So, and that other countries set firm emission standards like this. Norway is one, and there's been reference to Copenhagen. That shows that the world can do it. And I think Christchurch should join the cities where, in fact, we lead the way and actually give some evidence and some traction to the whole climate emergency thing, rather than having it as in the original proposal, to have it at 2045, which really doesn't really indicate any emergency. It doesn't indicate any determination to really get on with it. So I urge councillors to support the amendment and the rest of the resolutions.
I'm just going to insert myself in the speaking list. I support the staff recommendation, and the reason that I do is not because I don't think that this is an urgent issue. And I do understand the Chinese character for crisis. It's made up of two words, wei, which means danger, and ji, which is that point in time, that moment, that incipient time where something can go one way or the other. That is the word for crisis, that moment in time. The moment in time that we have to act has been identified, has actually already passed. But what the real risk here is that for the sake of looking as if we can actually change the way the city and our district operates, when in fact working with people, taking people with us, actually has a chance of making a real difference for the future. I just think that sometimes it's better to be to setting a realistic target that is achievable in people's minds. People's idea of what is achievable and the level of urgency that they will attach to it will change with time. And every 3 years, this will be brought back before the council and it will be redebated and reconsidered. And each time we will find that there is increased awareness in the community and people will want to come with us. We need other agencies to come on board. We need government departments that are based here to come on board. We need to have all of those community organisations who are putting their heart and soul into addressing these issues. We need them on board with us to be part of educating the public, but also giving people the very simple tools that they can apply to this. And we need to have all of those tools available through our website as well, but not just our website, through everyone else's website, so that everyone is sharing this. I would not sign, despite the fact that I actually did not bring the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. I didn't bring it to council for sign-off until I knew that we had the measurements, that we met the basics, and that we were able to carry on the journey and achieve the targets that I was signing up to. There's no point signing up to something before you know that you can achieve it. I agree that we take a leadership position. That's why we take a better position that the government has got. But I am really worried that we will leave people behind, that they won't see the opportunity that comes with addressing these issues now. And I'm afraid that we will miss out on the opportunity of using central government support in order to achieve those ambitious targets together. The target will come down, but I don't see why we should start beyond where we need to be. Pauline.
Yeah, well, I think therein lies the question, but I really feel that if we honour our declaration and show true leadership, that we can achieve this target by 2040, particularly as Phil said around transport, if we actually focus there. And localism, and we support localism. We support community groups. Look at what we're looking at in the residential red zone. I'm really proud of our cycleway program. I think that's going to have a huge effect on reducing our transport emissions. This morning on the Papanui Parallel, there was a whole bunch of 10 cyclists at the Beeley Ave intersection. That's amazing. That's fantastic. It's growing every day, the numbers. I think I saw Helen Clark speak, as others did a couple of weeks ago, and when she was asked the question, is this achievable, she was so positive. That's the message I took from her. Yes, we can do this. If everybody does something, everyone sets some targets on their own, and our role is to engage with people and educate. We're banging on at the ITI committee about how can we educate about cycling, how can we spread the good message about our cycleways and the growth in numbers at 34% a year that we're seeing, and probably more than that now. We could tie these two education strands together and really attack the transport issue. And I'd like to actually, this City Council, to seriously look at picking up that shuttle and running it ourselves like we used to, an electric shuttle around town. And that might actually encourage people to get on a bus, because at the moment you only get off right in town and you've got to walk a long way, and if the weather's inclement, blah, blah, blah. It just may actually, I think it will encourage people to embrace public transport. And we know we've got to get to a tipping point in public transport as well, and then it will improve and become more frequent. So I think there's a whole train of things that we can start off here, and I really believe that we can do it. So I'm really ambitious, and I'd like to show leadership and support our declaration and go for 2040. I'll support the amendment.
Anne?
I'm really torn. I have a real tension within me, because I really believe this is a really urgent problem. But I am really worried that by setting a target that people will see as unachievable, that we will lose them in this. And it's the tablecloth analogy, which I've used before, and I think it's really applicable to this, that, you know, you pull the tablecloth out too quickly and you leave everything behind on the table. It's that old trick. And I could even take it further and say, you know, we could pull it out quickly and wrap it around us like a superhero cape and take off into the distance. But what have we left behind? We've left behind all the people that we have to engage in working with us to achieve what we want to achieve. So as you can see, we've got a fantastically passionate, learned staff here that are recommending to this 2045, and I feel really confident that I feel comfortable going with that, so I will be supporting it. But I think empowerment is the key, engagement and empowerment, and I hear that we are going to be doing that, really seriously, and that brings me comfort. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Dion?
When I was at school, I didn't really hear much about climate change. I went to some rural schools and then into Marlborough, and it wasn't really discussed a huge amount, but it's been discussed a lot more, and it's becoming to the point where action has to be taken, and it's really pleasing to hear that a lot more education is going to be into schools. I think that is where, where we need to be really drilling home that this is really important, and you don't have to do everything the same way that we used to do it. I think public transport is really huge. I actually think there's something we could do right now that would be much better, and that's just making free public transport within the 4 Avs. I think that's just get on and get off, and it's free. We've already got routes, it's already there, and I actually don't think it would cost us any extra, because people, these routes are already going, and people outside the routes will be paying anyway. But anyway, I actually think there's some things that we're talking about around reducing our individual carbon emissions, but we need to be also thinking about offsetting as well. And there is a simple way we could offset. And I'm probably going to get called a tree hugger for the amount of things that I'll be talking about trees, but trees are really important, and I don't think we can live without trees. We say we need clean water. I actually think we should be having as much focus on trees. So if we planted 300 trees per person, that would offset our individual carbon emissions. That's over a period of time. That would mean 100 million trees for the city. If we planted 3,000 trees, if we planted 100 million trees in the city, it would offset the carbon that we have. You know, Christchurch has one of the poorest tree covers in an urban city in New Zealand, and we're the garden city. We're only at 16%. New York has 25%. I reckon we should be urgently looking at our district plan and amending and protecting trees, because I really think that that's one way we can actually offset the carbon emissions that we have. Yeah, as I said, I want our city to be around 40% of tree cover. I think that would be a healthy city. I think that's one way we can mitigate some of the issues, and if we also take individual action, I think that's going to make ourselves a very healthy city.
Glenn.
Thank you. The World Council of Churches in November also says this: it is estimated that the necessary economic and social transformations must take place within a rapidly disappearing window of opportunity, perhaps within as little as a decade, if we are to avoid catastrophic impacts of climate change. I was first made aware of climate change issues in the beginning of my career, 1989-90. I had a senior colleague a few years later who attended one of the early Earth summits. I think it's good to have a stretch target. It underlines the seriousness of the situation. My 14-year-old, our 14-year-old, our youngest, is constantly at me, Dad, what are you doing about climate change as a city councillor? What actions are you taking? He's reading constantly. He's always at me. What are we doing as a family? What are we doing as a city? I need to go home and look him in the eye and say, well, this is what I did today, I've done my best. I think we're all on the same page, we're all doing our best. We're talking about 5 years here, but I am going to support the amendment just to reflect the criticalness of the situation. We are a leader, we're known to be a leader as a city. I think it's critical we go further than needed and is in the recommendations. One other part of my training, which I did learn going back on the wording you mentioned, Phil, was in the Greek, the kairos and the chronos time, chronos being ordinary time, but the kairos is the opportune time, you know, that kind of seize the day. So I think we need to do it now and need to go for it. I support the amendment.
Sarah?
Climate change will impact almost every aspect of our lives and is in many areas of the world already, with record-breaking extreme weather events happening almost weekly. NIWA's latest report, released just a few weeks ago, is clear about the likely impacts of sea level rise on our country's infrastructure. Nationally, with only a 30-centimetre rise, 49,000 buildings are at risk, worth $12.5 billion. In Canterbury, it's 14,000 buildings worth $3.9 billion, 320 kilometres of roads and 831 kilometres of 3 water pipes. 80% of the Canterbury figures are for Christchurch. This is absolutely the most pressing issue our city and the planet faces, and we will get there. Doing nothing is not an option. Mitigating emissions now is an investment in our future, not only for public infrastructure, but for our coastal and riverside communities. The more we mitigate, the lower the impacts on them will be. The initial engagement with nearly 3,000 people involved asked us to be ambitious, but to be realistic, science-based and achievable. That's what 2045 is. 2045 is more ambitious than the government's target, but not so far removed that we will have to do it alone. Setting a final target now risks alienating people. Setting a final target now, 2040, risks alienating people and risks inaction when it is crucial that we give agency and encourage action. Helen Clark is clear that action on climate change, number 13 in the Sustainable Development Goals, cannot be done alone. It needs to be done collectively and cannot be forced on others. Equity and a just transition are essential. And when it comes to what we're going to do for the next 5 years, there's no difference between 2040 and 2045, as all of the options have a 50% cut in our emissions by 2030. This is what the latest information from the IPCC says we must do, and for me that's the key date. The other one isn't as important. We've got a 3-year review period at which point we can check progress, new information, adjust the target, and I have no doubt that we will achieve the target and that it is likely we bring it forward. But we will not achieve it if we don't work with our communities and businesses. Since 2010, the total number of kilometres driven in Christchurch has risen by 15%, and we need to act. If everyone who drives to work left the car at home just 1 day a week, we'd cut commuting kilometres by 20%. That may seem pie in the sky, but I mentioned it to one friend a couple of weeks ago and she started already. Keen to act and pleased to have been given a way to do it. Mm-hmm. Collective action starts with each one of us taking a single step. And we need to show climate change leadership, not only as a council, but as individuals. We are part of the collective action that is needed. And I challenge every councillor who wants action and urgency to act themselves to show the urgency they're asking for today. A proverb springs to mind. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And the question today for everyone is this: do you want to look good and feel good and miss the target, or do you want to bring everyone with you?
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you. I'll be supporting the staff recommendation today. And there's no question that our Tamariki and Mukapuna know more than we do with regards to the issues in climate change. It's how we get there, which is the understanding. When you have businesses, you have families, you have a living. And the example I would give, to take away the coal mining, say, on the West Coast, what are those families, etc., going to do? There is a lot of thought we've got to do about changing everything and every aspect in our lives. And that's a huge challenge, and it is our generation that has to do it. And unfortunately, sadly, it's you guys that have kind of been given the challenge, so good luck. I'm going to support the 2045 because our staff have come back and they're going to say they're going to come back to us every 3 years. So it may be, and hopefully to move forward, and it may be better than 2040, but this is a journey we've got to take. When we set strategies, I hate to break it to you, but the majority of people outside this building don't really care about strategies. They really don't. What's a strategy? We rattle off numbers and lengths and bits and pieces and how many, and no one really cares. If their toilet flushes, if their water runs, sweet. If their car's okay. But we've got to change those attitudes. A lot more people are thinking the right way, but there's a lot to go. And our staff need to bring everyone with us. And it's the example with pulling the tablecloth out is a really good one. And that's going to be a really difficult one, and it's going to be a long journey of education. It is getting a lot better, but we've still got to get there, and it's going to be a challenge. And if we lose the population on the way through, and we have to stop and collect them again, that stop and start could be disastrous and catastrophic. So we do have to start this journey properly and correctly, and that's why I'm taking on the staff's advice. We are ahead, as the staff said, ahead of the government's target of 2050, and a lot of the mechanisms they will put in place we won't have. So it's going to be difficult. But one of the things that I always thought about is it would have been very easy for the government to turn around and say, hey, let's ban copper brake pads and all this type of thing because of our waterways and the things it's doing. They've done it overseas, they've done it in California, they've done it in other countries. Our central government has never done it. So that thinking is still a problem in central government. So there's a huge journey to take, a huge change of attitude. And one of those that we need to do is look at our public transport. It's separated. ECAN's got some, we get a bit. It's not joined up at all. It's not about empire building. It's about common sense. And this is one of the things that could totally change and really help our journey. And it's something that we should be sitting down after the election with ECAN to sort out once and for all.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to support staff.
Good note to finish on. Thank you. Jimmy.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm in the innovation and also sustainability committee. I'm also in particular all the kind of submissions. And I think the committee, the target actually still the ambitious target, particularly if we review compared to the central government, and also we compare to the staff, the recommendation. Actually, still the ambitious target. But like some council particularly mentioned, if we got a feedback, 77% have this kind of concern or unknown, probably through those engagement, through those education, through those productive the communication, that's very, very important, yeah. I would like to take an example. We are all aware the South Express, those cycle route, but average is 23% is against, 77 is is support. But in Hornby area, I gathered information. It looks like half support, half the not support, because they have no any idea. Actually, council, we declare, this is the city is kind of the climate and the ecological, the emergency. They have no any idea. They thought why they spend the $35 million to cycleway should be transferred to the Southwest Leisure Center. We can build a more bigger the size of this one. So education, long-term education, communication, that's very, very crucial, important. So that's why the achievable, realistic, this target is very, very crucial and important. But if 2014-45, actually, no big difference, because we review the B, C, D, and E, no any difference. Everyone is total agree. Particularly, we compare the first, the 10 years, our target reduce the carbon emission is 50%. That's our commitment. And also, once every 3 years, we still have a opportunity, to review and possible to bring forward. From now on to the 2030, we have 3 times review our target, whether it's realistic. Particularly first 3 years, give us indicators whether we said that this target is realistic or not. We have not yet to try. We don't know. We don't know. So I would like to support as a committee the recommendation. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike and Aaron.
Thank you. Look, this has actually been a really good debate. It does appear to be a lot more passion than when we set our target for the council as an organisation. But what's been good about this, I think, is actually we're not talking about whether we should or should not set a target. We're actually talking about whether we should be setting it for 2040 or 2045. Both of those dates is actually quicker than what the government are looking at. So that's actually something we should be proud of as a council. I think the main thing is this needs to be a partnership, and it's a partnership with the people of Christchurch Council and central government. We must acknowledge the environment that we work in and the actual levers we have to play with. Look, I agree, PT is a huge opportunity there, and like Dion said about the free public transport within the 4As, that's something I raised a while ago, and I think it's a goer. We need to look at that, but potentially the best way to do that is actually get public transport off ECAN, who I don't think are doing a satisfactory job in that space. So there is levers we can pull, but there's not all the levers. So we must do this together, and we must take the people of Christchurch with us. I think one of the things we need to be realised as we do move forward to the target, we need to have a just transition. If we move too quickly, too soon, we will leave people behind, and they could be the most vulnerable. So I will be supporting the recommendations that came from the committee. I must note also that there were 5 committee members around the table who read the submissions, listened to the submissions, asked the questions, and 4 of us all supported the 2045, and I respect the reasons from Councillor Buck why she went for 2040, but I still will be supporting 2045.
Thank you. There was someone else. Aaron, sorry.
Yeah, I would be supporting the 2040. I believe the more ambitious, the better when you try to achieve anything major. I look at the biggest time in the world's history for a change and for achievement was 1939 to 1945. We started in 39 with the biplane and ended going through propellers right up to jet planes, open heart surgery. Don't ask how we got there, but all of those things happened in a 6-year period because the world had its back to the wall. And if people truly believe our backs to the wall on this one, then we have to make the targets and ambitions bold. And for people who don't believe that climate change may be the end of civilization as we know it, then they will end up with a planet that's in a lot better condition. So no matter which way you look at it, it's a win-win, because I dare anyone to spend 10 seconds on the end of a tailpipe and tell me how well you get on. It is not healthy. unless it's hydrogen or electric, of course. But beyond that, car emissions since I was a kid have always been bad. Growing gardens has always been good. Planting plants is a good thing. I've got 34 trees at my own house. I won't get up to 300, Dion, and there's 5 people living there, so 1,500 trees would be a jam. But we're doing our wee bit, and that's the way things will change, because all of my trees, other than the one big oak at the front, they're all edible. And so that means the food is coming a few feet into the door, or we eat it standing under the tree. It's not being shipped across the country or around the world. And and I eat plenty of things that are, but if we all make steps towards growing those things in our own yards and buying closer to home and having that circular economy on items, and we recycle more, the planet comes out better off. That's the journey we have to take the people on. And I think most of the population are up for it, because everyone knows pollution's bad.
All right, I'll just ask Vicky to close off the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the debate. I thought it was excellent, actually. I have to say, if I had, I intended to do a PhD at some stage, until somebody gave me one, which was much, much easier. But had I done one, I would have done it on the psychology of climate change, because I think it's absolutely fascinating. And one of the things I think is that the way in which climate change is going to happen is if there is a strong sense of belonging and people are encouraged and have a sense of hope and inclusion by other people doing things, and a city doing something. So I strongly believe in cities taking leadership. That's what I think cities are about. I don't think nation states are going to do that any longer. And I think the really compelling issue would be the sense that we can do this together. And I think Christchurch is exactly that sort of city where people can do things together. So I think that sense of belonging, the sense of some form of really strong ambition around climate change, because we've overcome pretty much everything else. So we want to do this. We want to make this highly visible, and we want to do this together. And we can help each other. I mean, the suggestions to other people of the practical things that they can do, I think is really, really important. I want to remind you that the government is trying to deal with an 18-tonne net carbon emissions per person. We are dealing with 6.6. And in either scenario, we have to get to halfway by 2030. So we go fast, and then for some reason we take our foot off the pedal and go slower for the second half of the journey. I like what Greta Thunberg said when she said, "I want you to panic." I want us to panic. I know I get told by my kids I'm not doing enough about climate change, and I know my carbon footprint is way lower than 6.6. But I think it's really important that as a city we do this in a highly visible way together, that gives us that sense of hope and inclusion, and that the city can do this. So I think this is one of the most important things, obviously, that we can do. And I think setting the target so that it's bold and ambitious, and then making everything that's possible visible to people, is not only does a whole lot for the city, but does a whole lot for the people in the city who have this sense of, I want to do something, but I don't quite know what, and and a number of the kids that spoke to us had that sense of powerlessness, which is horrible to see. I want people to be powerful in their own lives. So I think actually, in the psychology of climate change, going quicker and being bolder is the best thing that we can do. So I will definitely support 2040.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'll put the amendment first. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Okay, so if you put up your hand for aye, that's probably, I'll just do a count.
Division.
I'll have a division, all right. There's no need to yell, just calm down. You've been asked for, thank you.
7-9 lost.
Put the substantive one now. Put the
Okay,
substantive
so I'll
motion.
put the substantive motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you.